we now have come to understand that there's a universe of universes. Whoa, what's he talking about here?
Yeah, thank you. You took my question.
So I have come to understand that our universe is actually a bubble of physical reality in a vast sea of potential of the existence of universes. In other words, there is the big G entity, or call it quantum physics, quantum field, if you like, and the distant horizon of our universe is the barrier between our physical reality and the big G concept that's sponsoring and supporting and has created all other universes.
Welcome to another installment of Behind Greatness. It is, I don't know what episode this is, but I do know that it's the fourth time, at least on this podcast, that we have a returning guest. And his name is Rudy Schild. Before we get to Rudy, I want to thank our listeners for following us and coming on and listening to us. If you feel so inclined, please rate, share, talk about it with your family and friends. It's working. So mighty grateful for that. Visit our website. You can see our cache of interviews, any podcast platform. We're on all major ones as well. And also on our podcast, if you are so inclined to donate as well, we're a not-for-profit and a charity. Our partner on the charity front is Veritas. You can see all the details there on the website. We'd be mightily grateful as well. So like, review, comment, share, all the good stuff. And thanks again for coming on. So as I said, we have a returning guest. His name is Dr. Rudy Schild. I've already forgotten the episode numbers, but as we're recording this, we have not launched our part 3 yet, but you can see part 1 and 2 earlier on this year. I think it's 179, 184, more or less, but you'll easily find it. And we, as always, are excited to have him on because we have some interesting conversations and we learn a hell of a lot about literally the universe. As our regular listeners know, Dr. Rudy Schild is a professor emeritus at Harvard, worked at the Harvard Smithsonian Center for many decades, and he's got lots to share and lots to talk about. So, Rudy, welcome back.
Thank you, Luciano.
We were talking before the record, and this is not, it's something that we never brought up actually in the conversation. So I feel like a dolt for not bringing it up because it is my custom to bring this sort of thing up. Your wife was a singer, or she's a retired singer.
A concert, stage singer, and also opera. And she sung all over the world and performed on stage. Her preferred roles are the solo parts in the Mahler symphonies, which she has done and performed with principally Benjamin Zander and the Boston Philharmonic Orchestra. And to great acclaim, and she is now, at my age, performing no more, but extremely popular with the students at the Lange Conservatory of Music in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And before the recording started, I was starting to tell you that many of the students now, perhaps half of them, that she teaches are from China. Mm-hmm. Because they want to learn the Western traditions of musical performance and the vast literature, very rich, turn of the century opera, concert hall, and so on. So she is a classical performer and enjoys still teaching students the vocal techniques and also then staging techniques. And every class that she teaches ends the semester with a live performance of something. It would be staged, and the students are thereby instructed on how to arrange a staging, to do stage management, to do all of the tools that are involved in music production. And she is very, very popular. And I still got the most wonderful recollections of some of her stunning performances, in particular the Mahler Second Symphony in Carnegie Hall, New York, and many performed locally here in Boston.
I'm going to pick out something there that you said about Chinese students. Why? What is the change? Why are there so many Chinese students who are interested in this musical literature?
Worldwide today, it's considered that this European musical literature reached its high point near the end of the 19th century and the first part of the 20th century. The heroic operatic works of Wagner, the wonderful symphonic works of Mozart, Schubert, on to Brahms, Mahler, and contemporary music. All of those she excels in, and the Chinese seem to want to learn how this was done because their music conservatories were destroyed in the Mao Zedong. Literally, the books burned, the libraries burned, the concert halls turned down, and there's a great void in their appreciation and understanding of these great works, which are so celebrated around the world today, particularly in Europe and America, of course.
This prompted me to think about, or not think about, remember. So it didn't prompt a memory, it triggered a memory of a student, university student who approached me, I'm going to say about 10 years ago. And he's a Chinese student. He was a foreign student. And he said, your name belongs to a famous opera singer. And so that generation doesn't.
Luciano Pavarotti.
Right. So it surprised me that somebody that age would even know this, because most don't. I said, well, that's very astute of you. I said, I don't have any of that talent. He said, yeah, but I want to be an opera singer. I said, that's wonderful. Are you moving towards it? He goes, yeah, but my dad wants me to study marketing. So that's what I'm doing. I came here to do business school. What would you have said to him?
I would have said, study marketing, but you can also study music performance, perhaps as a listener as much as a performer. I know from what my wife tells me that the students in China in recent times are trying to recover from the dark period when there was basically no performance of this kind in the emerging China.
Mm-hmm.
Today, they've emerged and are a vast economic force in the world scene and are playing catch up. Now, what we find happening, however, is that the way they're being taught is not as much as it should be. Learning how to find your own voice and find your own style. What they're doing is listening recordings made by Westerners and imitating them.
Mm.
So they will know 5 opera arias and sing them beautifully. But Jane will recognize which recording they were listening to and studying off of.
Right.
And Jane has to move them away from that. My wife, Jane, has to move them away from that and get them to understand for themselves how they, in a similar circumstance, would have the emotions that are meant to be projected. and now they can project that in their performance.
Wonderful.
So that's a very different approach to music learning.
So I have two things to say to that. So when you said emotion, it's wonderful because I thought that you would say something to that effect, because we just had Pacho Flores on a few months ago, and he's a soloist, a trumpeter from Venezuela. He's now in residence in Spain on the Strambi campus. And so they developed a trumpet just for him, a four valve trumpet, the first in the world, just for his style. And he talked about his experience, his first solo experience living in Japan. And he said the Japanese are purists. And he said he had a wonderful time there building out his career as a soloist. But he said they're very structured. He goes, they don't allow for the movement and the individuality in the approach to the written music. He says that's what's lacking there. So he went on to say that. And then the second thing I wanted to mention to you, Ia Whiteley was on the podcast, and I know you and I chatted about her before. She's a space psychologist, and so she talks. She spoke to us about some of her research and how she studies professional intuition, and so she literally is she saddles up to professionals, specifically pilots and astronauts, and shadows them while they are executing their professional decision making and using their intuition. So she researches that. She's right on the edge with the people who are on the human capability edge, right? So people who are in space and in the air. And she brought it back down to earth by giving us. I'm sorry, I'm speaking so long here, but I want to give this to you. She brought us back down to earth by giving us an example of surgeons, and how two surgeons of the same discipline will attack something, who are at the top of the game, will attack something very differently because of their professional intuition, how it's developed over time, post training, through years of experience, and they feel differently because they're two individuals. So they attack the same problem differently through their feeling and intuition. And that's what she says other people can't learn. So she wants to, part of her research is finding out how to capture that and teaching that. And so going back to your wife.
Yes. So you're right. That's very close to the music performance. It has a lot in common with what my wife is doing, actually.
Did you ever have discussions with your wife, being an artist, being a singer, on where she gets her inspiration for her art form?
That's a tough one. I know that she gets it not from listening to recordings of all the famous people who have done it before, but rather going back to the original score, noticing the musical markings on the sheet of paper, and reading that to understand the intent of the composer, and then putting herself into the place of where the composer left off in creating the art performance that contains the composer's intent and her own intent and her own personality. So she puts together the original concept of the performance with her experience as a human, her shared experience as a human being, and how she can project that emotional content.
So in a way, she transports herself through the feeling of her, through feeling what that composer may have been intending or feeling themselves.
Exactly right. Very good.
Is she accessing the black hole?
I don't think that you would say that she is doing it consciously.
Hmm.
But of course, she is accessing the entire history of performance of this role, which is all stored at the black hole. The black holes of our universe act as nature's hard drives and store the entire past, and will later talk about how, in fact, they access the future also. But that takes a whole lot of discussion, and they this it accesses the potential future, which, however, will always be modified by the personal experience of the person whose consciousness is being discussed now. Anyway, it gets to be very complicated very quickly.
Yes, I believe you, and we've had you on a few parts already, so we understand the complication or the complex nature of this. But it's fun. So the listener, I'll preface by saying our regular listener who's listened in on the first 3 parts will understand that you talk a lot about nature's hard drive. The black hole is nature's hard drive. The last, and I promised you this too, at the last few minutes of our last recorded discussion, we were talking about being curious and exploring the frontiers as a child. And I said, more or less, I said, wouldn't it be wonderful if you can do this, explore the frontier, quote unquote, as a child, because what you see is all magic. And then you responded and said, well, maybe because what you see is all real. Or rather, maybe what you see instead is all real. And then you said a couple of things, and I promised that we would start off in part 4 on this. You mentioned ultracosmic intelligence, and then you mentioned the universe of universes.
Yes. Oh, yes. There we go.
Let's run. You run, I'll follow.
Okay. Yes, this is getting now to a lot of very fascinating areas. And the complexity is confounded by the fact that we're really bordering on the fringes of discussing religion, because there is some relationship between our consciousnesses and the founding principles of the universe. And I believe you may have heard me say that I tell young people that, say, at the age of your own children, like 16, 18, upper teenage years, that you're about to now face a lot of choices in your life. Until now, it's been automatic that you're going to go to elementary school and that you're going to go to high school, and then you're going to decide between college or profession, and it's been on automatic. But now you're going to be discovering that, well, you have choices to make about, are you going to be doing drugs, and what flavors? Are you going to go on and expand education, or go directly into management? And you have to, at this point, understand that you're bringing yourself into the picture of the rest of your life now. And so these choices that you're making will affect you the rest of your life. And these choices are, for example, what are you going to do about your sexual orientation? What are you going to do about marriage? There's a potential of children here. How do you fit yourself into this picture of all the choices that people have to make in their young lives, and then stay with them for the rest of their lives? So I tell them that as you make these choices, it's most appropriate for you to understand the purpose of the universe. And I didn't read this anywhere. I concluded this myself, that the purpose of our universe is for life to emerge and thrive. And I tell the young people that insofar as your life is aligned with this universe purpose, you will probably be successful. You want your life to be in step with the workings of the universe, or aligned with this purpose of the universe. And let that guide your life. I have a grandson just now of this age, and it's interesting that in university, he attended classes in philosophy. He took a course in basic elementary philosophy, which, of course, takes you through a historical perspective, but also allows you to dig deeper. And he said he noticed by mid-semester that with my teaching of this purpose of the universe in his mind, his responses in class were such that the professor was always looking at him during his lecture. He was teaching primarily to him. The professor was tuned in to the fact that he seemed to have it the most together and to most be guided by something that the professor didn't really understand, but it sure was working. So I bring this example of the grandson to the fore because I think that it's something that will encourage young people to go in the right direction and always advance toward enhancement of life and be in alignment with this purpose of the universe.
And so then what is the universe of universe?
All right. So we get to what the universe is. You know, we had at the turn of the 1900s era, a new direction in physics called quantum physics, because late in the 1800s, scientists at the Cavendish laboratories in England were discovering the proton, the electron, the neutron, learning how to manipulate them, seeing how they constitute atoms, and that changed their properties. But noticing that something in the universe was setting a set of rules by which particles had to interact with each other following these rules. And we called them quantum theory, or the theory or the quantum theory of nature. Nobody really knew where the rules came from or how they entered our universe. They were just there. And at the time, it was just necessary to understand what the rules are. Let me give you an example of one of these rules. When an electron goes into orbit around a proton and makes a hydrogen atom, that hydrogen atom allows the electron to be in only certain places. It can orbit at only certain energy levels. And so why is that? Well, that's the rules that I'm talking about. There's something, this quantum aspect of the universe, setting rules. And as we went on, we came to learn more and more through the 20th century, that is the 1900s, about how important these rules were and how we had to come to understand them because they seemed to be deeply embedded in the structuring of all matter in the universe. You couldn't escape them. Everything was following these rules. Now, in the late 1900s, Richard Feynman came along and said, wait a minute, it's turning out that the rules that we invented to explain the properties of atoms and the atomic structuring of matter in our universe, those same rules seem to have a wider application in our lives. And eventually, we will come to understand, as I understand, that this quantum theory is fundamental to our consciousness and to our being. Now, suddenly, these rules or this quantum theory of physics is up against religion. After all, isn't that what religion has taught us? Is to understand our relationship expressed in consciousness and realized in consciousness. And so we usually talk about this in religious practice. Mm-hmm. Now we're getting very close to quantum physics being the same as the G word. The G word is spelled G-O-D, usually with a capital G. And so the physicists go on talking about quantum physics, but in our lives daily, we have this other thing, religious practice. And we are now coming to see that these are the same thing.
So what are your thoughts on the big God?
My thoughts are they are what have created our universe, and it is the purpose of the big G guy that life should emerge in his universe and thrive. Can you see that I'm coming back to what I started out with? I make no apology. That's the way the universe works. Now, it's even much bigger than that. We now have come to understand that there's a universe of universes. Whoa, what's he talking about here?
Yeah, thank you. You took my question.
So I have come to understand that our universe is actually a bubble of physical reality in a vast sea of potential of the existence of universes. In other words, there is the big G entity, or call it quantum physics, quantum field, if you like, and the distant horizon of our universe is the barrier between our physical reality and the big G concept that's sponsoring and supporting and has created all other universes. And so I've come to realize from studying the structuring of black holes within our universe that the outer boundary of our universe, which is now understood in textbooks, you'll read in your college astronomy course that, the universe just kind of peters out at its outer edges. It just gets thinner and thinner and lower density until the question just becomes irrelevant. Well, wrong. We have now come to understand that the quantum field limits the size of black holes, and that limit is the same thing that works in reverse at the boundary of our universe. Let me explain. In our universe, we recognize the existence of black holes, which are a very condensed state of matter. We see from studying the black holes that outside of them is physical space, and inside of them is a field. It's called a Bose-Einstein condensate, which acts like some connection to the universe of universes, and we stop talking about it because it's all speculation there. We cannot go there. We cannot send a probe there. Cannot do astronomical research there. We just have to stop there and say, well, the black hole exists. And there is something that goes on in the center, but we can't ever really know how it works. Well, the universe that we are in has the same thing in reverse or inside out. Remember, I told you the universe of the black hole we see in our universe has physical reality on the outside. That's our space that we deal with daily. And it has the spiritual something on the inside, the quantum field on the inside. The outer horizon of our universe has the physical universe in its inside, and its exterior side is this spiritual quantum space, so that our universe is a bubble of physicality, of physical existence inside a vast sea of potential of all other universes. And if you ask yourself, well, what is the sum of this? What is the sum of all universes and all being and existing in all universes? And how can that be anything but God? I said the G word, but I've been talking about it as a physicist as quantum, but actually it's what the other camp is calling the creator or God.
Have you always thought of this as God? At one point, I thought you were, or if I remember correctly, you were atheist, or agnostic, in a sense.
Actually, I was raised with the Lutheran training.
Yeah.
And at age around 20, I became aware that that couldn't help me at all. And I just rather shed it, but I didn't downplay it. I didn't see it as wrong or harmful or a problem. Rather, I just said, I'm not learning anything from that. What I can learn is somewhere else, and I studied astronomy.
I would say that's probably one of the best ways to learn. If you're talking about, again, silly old me saying this, if you're talking about the vast sea of potential, because I think the only way to learn about the universe, not studying it mathematically, like you have been doing, is to involve yourself in an emotive vocation, like your wife.
Uh-huh. Well, yes.
So,
and in fact, to marry my wife.
and you did.
So
it's universe is matching. Universe.
That I'm complete. That is, the two of us are complete. Yeah, I'm the guy who's working on the inside, and she's working on the outside,
yeah.
something like that.
Your house is like the universe of the universes. So.
Very good.
But jesting aside, I am starting to believe this more and more. We like to have artists on the podcast, and frankly, we want to have more artists on the podcast because there is something about an artist, and not just, but let's pick on artists for a second, that they're not happy with just thinking about something or studying something. They want to immerse themselves in the feeling. They want to be transported. I mean, again,
That's
example of your wife. Your wife is transporting herself to the mind and the emotional state of that composer to see how she can then do the same for herself to continue the piece. I mean, that's not something that we learn in school, right? That's not something that we're trained in traditionally, at least in the Western world, and it's frowned down upon unless we're successful at it. Right? This is the conundrum that we've built for ourselves. It's a silly conundrum that we've built for ourselves. So when you say, going back to the words, the universe is the vast sea of potential. As a parent, I see nothing but potential with my kids, even when they get under my nerves, even if they annoy me. I love them to death, but I see the potential. I see they could just do anything. Like there is no limit. There is zero limit. And I'm down. And when I'm down on myself, I find that I lack that of myself. But when I am in a powerful mood, so to speak, I use powerful, that's simplifying it. I feel the vast potential that I have. And then it has me think often, especially when I'm in conversations like this, and I'm the question's coming. When I'm confronted with people like you who think about these things, what does that mean about us? Why do we exist? Because our bones and flesh are obvious barriers to the actual understanding of the vast sea of potential, because we can't be there. I would love to be at the boundary of a black hole. I would love to be at what you say is or what they say is the tail end of the universe, to see the flip side. Why can't I be there? I can't be there because of my damn body. So why the hell does my body exist? What am I? I mean, that's the question. That's the question.
We have to bring in the nature of consciousness.
Okay.
In other words, it's your consciousness that allows you to go there. Your physical body cannot.
Mm-hmm.
That's the rules of the structuring of the universe that we've got. However, the mind can, and in some people does go there. Now, I have to tell you something that's so closely related and relevant here. And that is, our brains are conditioned to serve us very well to live in the physical space that surrounds us.
Mm-hmm.
It keeps us from tripping over a log if we walk in the woods. It keeps us, teaches us to duck if a tree branch is falling upon us. It teaches us to maintain our existence and health and well-being in a physical universe. However, there are some people who can see, in addition to the three-dimensional world that's around us, into a kind of a fourth dimension, which is the quantum aspect of the universe. And now my mind is so polluted by mathematics that I see this in a mathematical way, and it's hard for me to talk about it in words, but I'll give it a try. We can start with light. And you know that light is caused by oscillations of electrons, and that causes things to jitter and transmit waves outwards and all of that. And that's what we call a three-dimensional operation. You have two dimensions of the oscillation of the light, and then it spreads out into a third dimension. Now, there are some people who have seen a UFO, and it is operating on the quantum energy of the universe in addition to the three dimensions of the three physical dimensions. Now, can you see how complicated this is getting, which is why I find it hard to talk about this? But let me say that people who have been exposed to the light of the UFO have, through their connections to neurons to the brain, have opened their brain to new neural pathways, which are of this four-dimensional character. In other words, they rewire the brain. You don't lose anything. You gain new pathways, new neural connections, and through those connections, you become sensitive to the quantum field as it's affecting other people, and that's what consciousness is. And so these people find that they're very sensitive to the quantum fields around other individuals. And they become bird whisperers, animal whisperers. They become intuitive, know what you're thinking. They find, well, like twins who pick up the phone and discover, oh, that the other twin just picked up the phone too, and they could just talk in the phone. They don't even have to dial. Somehow there was a connection that neither understands, but they are highly attuned to the mind of that opposite twin. And so it is that it's not just among twins, but there are people who have this wiring and find it easy to communicate to other people who have this wiring. And they get along socially extremely well.
This reminds me of a conversation we had a little over 2 years ago, and I never mentioned her to you. She's a psychiatrist, but also a mathematician, Diane Hennessy. And she has studied this. She wrote a book, and we'll put it in the show notes. I've forgotten about it, but the discussion is around ESP, and she gives these examples. So she's researched this kind of phenomenon.
That's it exactly.
Yeah, and she was a very gifted mathematician and decided to go into medicine as well. Disappointing a lot of her colleagues who thought she was a brilliant mathematician.
No, but she understood there was something beyond mathematics. And that is a field. That is to say, her work in mathematics took her to the limits imposed by mathematics. It's a discipline, and what it does is close off other possibilities and focus on just the relationships between numbers and ways of thinking about these relationships and mathematical systems, but then closing off the intuitive part.
Well, so you
came to recognize that, I presume, from what you say, and she wanted to get to this intuitive part, which is in medicine.
Yeah, see, now it's all coming back. You're right. She was, in fact, an intuitive, and she always wanted to be a dancer when she was a kid. She gave a great story about studying ducks and the movements of ducks in a group on a pond, and how she saw the patterns, she saw the math, and why it looked chaotic from the outside, but she saw the math. But let's stay on that point for a second, because you said a few minutes ago that your mind has been polluted by the math. You used the word polluted. Right. So I know that you said that in half.
It's not polluted as much as limited.
Okay. Well, so what do you regret?
Limited.
Okay. So let's say limited. Fine. Fair enough. Do you have any regrets of what your math may have limited in your life?
No, because I have sort of come to the point where, all right, this is as far as our understanding of the physical universe can go. But that understanding does not teach us anything about consciousness. We learn about consciousness from brainwave scans and so on. And so we know that the brain's operation is highly susceptible to outside perceptions in the brain. And I think I gave you the example by Edgar Mitchell of the astronauts having their brain slip out of their body and pick up the consciousness of an elephant and not see a picture of an elephant, but re-experience or internally experience
Amazing.
the experience an elephant in the Sahara Desert is having, and have to deal with that while they're on a space mission. So that's exactly to your point, that in consciousness, we see limits to what we could ever know and describe and study through physical science and mathematics. We understand there is some boundary there, and it's the boundary of the black hole. It's the boundary at the edge of our universe, the distant horizon, we call that. And that's a different space altogether. And that is the place of the G word. That is to say, that's where religion takes over.
Side note for the listener, go to part 2 to listen to Rudy's recount of the story about the consciousness of the elephant and NASA astronauts. Please do yourself a favor and listen to that. Always happy to have you on, Rudy, and every single time I'm happier than the last. So
the only problem is he's so damn unpredictable.
No, that's a good problem. That's a good problem, in my opinion. Unless you're my kids, then it's a problem. Which is in and of itself a problem that I have as a father. So I have to celebrate the unpredictableness. Let's stay on the same point, though. Again, just kidding aside, you sent me an email in response to a couple of episodes that you listened to that we had recorded recently. One with Garry Nolan, the other one with Matthew Roberts, and you were intrigued by them, which was very cool. But I'm going to read like a quick snippet of that email, if you don't mind. But you repeated in your email a question that I had asked Garry Nolan, and you went on to give your own answer of this. And so I'm now about to read. So, quote, "Where do you go when you die?" So that's the question I asked Garry, and you wrote this. Your answer is, "Your coherent physical description in quantum space leaves your physical body, and a low amplitude description of you joins the snapshot of all being that covers the outermost layers of all the black holes in our universe, which are continuously recording the state of the universe as they act as nature's hard drives. Sensitive human individuals can tune into this quantum." And you say, and you put in brackets, "your signal. I can occasionally pick up tidbits from Edgar Mitchell in Apollo 14. Eventually, as more news gets stored, this weak presence becomes diluted to insignificance." Unquote. That is the most unique response. You were on. You were in a flow there. So you've talked about these points more or less in the last 30 minutes or so. Let me cherry pick from what I just read. You said, and I repeat, "I can occasionally pick up tidbits from Edgar Mitchell, who passed away in 2016. What do you mean by that?
Well, this goes to a little agreement that I formulated with Edgar shortly before he died. When Edgar Mitchell died, he died of a fall injury. And he was at the time in his home, and his dying bed, Rey Hernandez visited him. Rey Hernandez lived in Florida at the time and could easily come and visit Edgar, who was in Palm Beach. Ray asked Edgar, "Would you like to talk to Rudy Schild?" And Edgar, "Oh yes, I'd love to talk to Rudy." And Ray handed him the phone and, "Hi, Rudy, hi, Edgar," and so on. And after we chatted a little bit about the lecture I gave in Florida to his science museum and things of that kind, I said, "Edgar, I understand this is a very difficult time for you, but if you find yourself on the other side, and if you want to communicate with me, the code is um, um, Edgar said so." And so when I'm in writing notes about these topics and I get an inspiration that sounds to me like it's Edgar said so, I make in my notebook, I write superscript E period M period.
Hmm.
And that means to me that somebody whispered this into my ear. And his initials are EM. So that's what I mean by the whispering in my ear.
Does this
This was a
happen?
dying wish that he should be able to communicate with me in this way.
Do you communicate back?
I don't attempt to, and I don't think it works that way. And that's because EM is now in another place of more universal possibilities. That is, he's in a much grander and greater space. And so it's likely that he will be able to help me out to understand this grander space, but doesn't need my help describing this one.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
He
that
had a
makes sense.
lifetime in this space, in physical. So he doesn't have to be told anything about it.
He's actually living in the
So
vast sea of
it's
potential.
really one-way communication. And thank you, Edgar.
That's beautiful. So this is a reminder for me because I have here also in my notes to bring something up to you, which I've had in my notes in the last 3 conversations. You had developed or built a device with a couple of other people. I think I wrote the names down correctly. I think Dennis Reefer and Carolyn Corey.
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay. So you built a device to quote unquote tune in on deceased spirits.
That's right.
Elaborate. Please elaborate.
Okay. The device goes back to Dean Radin,
Okay.
who is the principal scientist at IONS.
Mhm.
Dean Radin did a beautiful experiment because it is a demonstration. The experiment is a demonstration of how electrons being passed through a double slit arrangement can take a path that demonstrates the physical properties of the electrons, but also can exhibit sometimes to dominance the wave nature of electrons. And whether the device is more particle-like in behavior or more wave-like or quantum in behavior can be modulated by the consciousness of individuals. So the experiment consisted of the following. He set up his apparatus on a table. 6 feet away was a table with the apparatus. And the subject who was a graduate student or maybe a person adept at meditation or whatever um, um, would be instructed by a computer on their table, separate from the table with the apparatus, and would be told, now do deep concentration. And after about 30 seconds time, the computer screen would exhibit a red screen suddenly and say, now end concentration. And then you're supposed to just relax and think about what you just said or whatever you want to do, dream or whatever. And then up comes the green screen. Begin concentration. And then after a time again, end concentration. So on a tape now was the human experience of concentration as commanded, and then separately, whether this laser interferometer device was acting more particle-like or consciousness-like. So you could then match the two records together, and he would consistently conclude that some adept individuals were very, very good at switching the apparatus from its more physical-like state to its more consciousness-like state. It was a striking result. Now, Dennis Briefer looked at this piece of apparatus and realized that using a material that we called a glazed grating, you could get much more sensitivity in it by creating multiple paths and adding the results all together. And so you could make an amplified version of the original Dean Radin apparatus. Well, in Star Trek, such an apparatus is shown to us. The Beverly Crusher doctor character on Star Trek has such a device that she holds in her hand. And when somebody has been injured in a confrontation, that's the drama of the episode of Star Trek, the body is laid out on a couch, made comfortable, and then Beverly Crusher is seen to pass this device across the body, and the device records whether the body being scanned is doing the strong modulation that makes it more wave-like, or meaning that there is life present and consciousness in this individual, or whether the person is more like dead, does not exhibit strong consciousness, and does not influence the laser device, and it goes back to its particle recording nature. So the device that Dennis built is exactly the little device that prophetically Beverly Crusher holds in her hand in detecting whether this warrior that we've got on the table is alive and exhibiting strong consciousness or is evidently dead. Maybe to be brought back to life by some means, but anyway, is not showing consciousness. Now, Dennis's device was so sensitive that another person who joined our research group then, named Caroline Corey. Do you know Caroline Corey?
No, I just remember the names and I wrote them down.
Okay. Caroline Corey could repeat the Dean Radin experiment where she, in California, 3,000 miles away could affect Dennis Briefer's instrument.
Come on.
So in real time, we would give her, Dennis and I would give her a secret, a signal. Caroline, now start concentration. Dennis Briefer's version showed the output of the apparatus, which was in his presence, and you would see on the strip chart recorder that as soon as she started her concentration, the strip chart, the pen would go off in a new direction, always showing a higher sensitivity to consciousness. In other words, Dennis could cue Caroline to make the recording apparatus be on or record strong consciousness or wave-like behavior of the apparatus, or weak consciousness, more of a physical experience in the subject, in which case the apparatus would go into its particle mode. So in real time, we could command that her consciousness was affecting his apparatus. She could do it consistently over 15 or 20 minutes time. Now, we tried to push this to the limits and take it to places like old graveyards and so on, and see if we could detect any consciousness present there, and that was not successful. We were not able to have the manipulation or the scanning of this apparatus that Dennis held in his hand at the graveyard. We were not able to achieve the success in having that affect the physical or wave character of the apparatus the way Caroline could do so from her remote location in Los Angeles, California, 3,000 miles away.
I understand why you would bring it to graveyards, but what about, it sounds like a really morbid, but what about hospices? What about getting hospices or getting people at the time of transition?
Yes. We didn't continue it further because Caroline got off on a different project, which was to make her movie about the UFO activity registered by her research team in the Catalina Island, the island area of San Diego. So she was doing another thing. It resulted in her movie titled A Tear in the Sky. And you do want to see that.
Yeah. Oh, we had Kevin Day here back in the fall. He's retired Navy. So he worked in the U.S. Navy, and he was on battleships, and he was in charge of their security, their radar, and he had sightings there. And so we went through his story and what he saw, what he felt, and how he's been.
Mm-hmm.
And he's the one who first told us about the Tear in the Sky. Now you remind me. I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you see, when she became involved in that, we didn't have our source. And so Dennis and I let ourselves get distracted by other business, and the project just died. And I'm very sorry about this now, because we never wrote a scientific report about the effectiveness of Dennis's instrument and a description and photographs of the instrument and all of that. So there is no research paper or no record of this activity. And Dennis seems not inclined to try to restore it or try to repeat the experiments and so on. And that's a fair choice. I find it too easy to go along with that because I'm so busy. And
of course.
And am being torn in many directions to finish this project and finish that project.
Completely understandable. There's a recently retired professor, Gary Schwartz, out of University of Arizona, I believe.
Yes, I've met Garry Schwartz,
Well,
and he and I had a talk about these researches in consciousness, and he invited me to attend a symposium that they're having in Tucson, maybe had already. And I'm sorry, I didn't actually. Um, I got myself in a negative loop. Um, I didn't reply because I was so busy with other things. And I said, well, I don't want to have to tell him that I can't come. So I put off telling him. And in the end, I didn't do anything.
uh-oh.
So that's just left an ugly taste in everybody's mouth. It did not end
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
I'm not proud of myself or of what happened. But you can understand that
Yeah, it happens to everybody.
we're all doing, pushing ourselves to the limits.
Yeah, you get it. So maybe if we ever connect with him, because we've wanted to connect with him for that reason, that he was working on something he called the soul phone.
Yes, that's right. He was
Yeah.
trying to do the soul phone. John Mack was very interested in this.
Huh.
He was aware from his contacts with people who had seen UFOs and who now had this UFO induced sensitivity to the spiritual, or I say, quantum world. And in many cases, these people, living people now, were able to contact the spirits of their ancestors,
Man.
which is why we all knew John Mack's work and knew that what he was trying to do. And that's why, as part of our project, he took the device to the graveyard to see if some spirits there could affect the handheld device. So this all fits together now. And it's incomplete work. So you see, it brings in Gary, it brings in Caroline Corey, it brings in all the greats, and it's a work in progress. I think of it as a work in progress, but it may never be completed because Dennis is retired now. He's moved, so he doesn't have all of his laboratory equipment surrounding him, and
Sure.
he's a wonderful experimentalist. Did brilliant work in building this device, but never produced what you would call a production model.
That is very interesting.
Isn't it fascinating?
It really is. I mean, these are scientists, experimentalists going to a graveyard to try things.
Sometimes it fails. I mean, sometimes they don't follow through. You only hear about the successes.
Yeah. I mean, there are many more failures than successes, but successes come out of
probably
trying and failing.
The thing about athletics is that you got to be a success all the time.
Yes.
These scientists are allowed to fail sometimes.
Well, I mean, that's why athletes get paid tens of millions of dollars and you don't.
Yeah, that's right. You go out on the field, everybody's watching you. There's nothing that's not noticed.
Can't disappoint.
Yeah.
Cool. Very cool. More than very cool. Rudy.
Yeah.
Rudy. We're gonna have another part. We're gonna have a part 5.
I got you seduced.
You've done good work. That's great.